everybody, my name is Kate Brown, and I, as you can tell from my accent, am from the deep South in America. I am from the state of Alabama. I live in a city called Florence with my husband Brandon and our only child so far, Margot the cat. You know, when Brandon and I met, we met in Florence. We fell in love in Florence, and when it was time for us to start our lives together, the only place we could imagine doing it was Florence. At the time, we didn't really know why, but Faith Church, where we both go together, where we've made our church home, played such a big factor in that. And so we chose to settle here. It became clear to me why we did so about 4 years ago, when I began to feel this immense call into ministry. See, I didn't know what it meant yet or where God was taking me, but He did. So for 4 years, I trained and I studied and I learned ministry. And about a year ago, God rewarded me, and my lead pastor took the chance on me to hire me for a full-time position at Faith Church, one of the fastest growing churches in America. It's been such an honor and a privilege. I am my lead pastor's executive assistant, and I direct our guest services department. Now, I will tell you, my absolute favorite part of the job is getting to meet people, pour into them, encourage them, and build relationships on a daily basis. That being said, we're a pretty large church with people from all different backgrounds, different walks of life, different areas that they came from to come to Faith Church or live in this city. So I am learning that your personality is largely dependent on where you grew up. For example, if you're from the northern states of America, you're probably known for a pretty abrasive, direct personality. You cut to the chase and there is no playing around about it. But if you are from the South, like I am, you are just dripping in sweetness and politeness, and there is a leisurely pace you carry yourself with. Now, Northerners will get their flack for being so direct. People say, why? Where's your heart? Where's your warmth? But then what the Northerners have on us Southerners is that we are not always so authentic in that sweetness. See, we Southerners have this little card in our back pocket that we can pull out at all times, and that card is called Southern hospitality. Southern hospitality can be your best friend, or it can be your worst enemy, depending how it's being used in the time. So for example, I'll give you a chance to use it in a good way. If you are in a conversation with somebody and you totally forget their name, you blank, you space, you're out of options, thanks to Southern hospitality, you're not. We give you 3 terms that you can call any given person on any given day. You've got y'all, sugar, or honey, whichever one you want to use. So in the South, you might hear phrases such as, sugar, it was so nice talking to you. Honey, would you grab that for me? Or my personal favorite, y'all need Jesus. In the South, we have very different languages embedded in the way we speak our English. Just like there are multiple languages that make up your region, we have that too, only it's a much more hidden and deceptive way. So everybody knows in the South we have this phrase, bless your heart. But it can mean so many different things. So for example, if I were to say to you, bless your heart, what I probably mean is, I just love you, I think the world of you, and I hope that God gives you everything you're asking for. But if I say to you, bless your heart, what I'm really saying is, you're an idiot, but I can't tell you to your face. Like I said, it can be your best friend or your worst enemy. And you know, I like to think that I am the former. I like to think that I'm sweet and kind and everybody enjoys having an encounter with me. But I will tell you one thing, I am very competitive. So if you challenge me or you cross me, you just might get your heart blessed. I am a very competitive person, but I promise it is mostly with myself. For example, I set these audacious goals for myself each year. I am a consumer of classic literature, and I try to top myself by how many books I can read each year, and will go to extreme lengths to meet that goal. But I'm also pretty obsessed with fitness. There is nothing cooler to me than pushing your body beyond its boundaries and seeing what it can achieve today that it wasn't capable of yesterday. That being said, I am a person and strong believer of the power of balance. I like to think that my body type says, works out, but definitely loves ice cream. See, because I am such a performance-based person, I have really high expectations for myself, for others, and for my experience here on earth. And I have found that I am not the only one. See, I do what we all do. I make plans, big ones. I make a plan A and a roadmap to get where I want to. I have a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, and I am ready to pull those out in a moment's notice. But if the plan falls apart, you better believe I have a plan C sub point 10429Z. I am ready to go, and I really like having my control over my plans. I'm not alone, because you might resonate with that. You might hear that too. It's because we are a people of great expectations. And why shouldn't we be? You know, we are made in the image of a creator who has put within us gifts and personalities, appetites and desires that look like his. And I just think that is so cool that the creator of the universe wants to share some part of himself with us. And so because he cherishes his creation, he wants us to as well. He wants us to enjoy our time here on earth, to cherish, to love, use the earth that he has given us. And so we make our plans. We lay out the details of our life on this perfectly plotted map. We have color-coordinated tabs. We have every organizational system in place working to our advantage. But it doesn't always work out for us. See, we have such high expectations that we make it hard to maintain those. And so I ask you the question, doesn't it ever just get heavy carrying the weight of your plans? You know, I prayed to God before we met here for weeks and weeks leading up to this. And I said, God, you know these women more than I ever will. You know their hearts, you know their passions and their victories. You know the reason that they cry at night. And so I asked him, God, what would you have these women receive this weekend? What do you want to give them? And he gave me such a resounding answer. It was affirmed everywhere I turned. In conversations with friends and things I read, he made it all too clear to me that there is a need that we all share. And that is, we need freedom from expectation. We need freedom from our expectations. And so I think there is something powerful when we submit our plans to God and allow him to give us instead a new purpose and new desires. So that's where I want to go with you today. And I say, let's just dive right in. So I don't know about you guys in Canada and how you do things, but we Americans are crazy. And there is nowhere that this is more clear than in designing and planning the wedding day. See, the wedding is supposed to be the best day of our life. It's supposed to be like something out of a fairy tale book and completely better than the other 364 days of the year combined. We have high expectations for them. And you know, in Jesus's day, a wedding was actually supposed to be a predictor of the success or failure of the marriage. And so if something would go wrong with the wedding ceremony, or if it would go wrong with the party, people would actually look at the couple and they would say, I kid you not, things like, well, the bride and groom must not be very happy. I give it 5 years. Too bad their marriage is doomed to fail because that one thing didn't work out the way it was supposed to. No pressure, right? But that's exactly what we do to ourselves in planning the wedding. So we want the 6-tiered wedding cake. We want the cascading white dress. We want doves to fly over the ceremony, but not because we planned it that way. Oh no, we just want it to magically happen on its own because that's how magical the day is going for us. And we want our family to be on its very best behavior. This is what we hope for and what we expect out of a wedding. But how many of you know that this just does not happen? It's hard enough to get that photo on your actual wedding day, but try applying that same standard to every day of your life, and it is not going to work out for you. See, because we are a people with great expectations, we experience something called expectation violation. It's what happens when your best laid plans fall apart. Your color-coordinated, perfect map is torn to shreds and you can't even connect the pieces anymore. And all you're left with is your response. See, my expectations were violated when I found that I would have to be here recording today instead of in person with you all. I so wanted to meet you face to face. I wanted to hear your hearts and know what God is doing in your lives and through this incredible ministry that's put on this conference for you. But I would be lying if I said there wasn't a part of me that was just as disappointed that I don't get to eat wedding cake with you guys there. I mean, come on, wedding cake is practically my second favorite food group. When I go to a wedding, that is the reason I am going. Forget the bride and groom, get them out of the way, and get me to the cake. I was laying in bed thinking about this one night, the conference, not the cake, sort of. And I had this image come to mind from my all-time favorite book. The book is called Great Expectations, and it's by Charles Dickens. See, Great Expectations is the story about happily ever afters and how they're never what we think they're going to be. So instead of having a blushing bride and gorgeous pastels, you get a very different image. You have a rotting cake, cobwebs on the party table, and a corpse of a bride in a moth-eaten dress. This is what it looks like when we choose disappointment. See, the woman in this photo is named Miss Havisham, and Miss Havisham was left at the altar on her wedding day. She had two options in front of her. She could grieve it and move on with her life, or she could do what she chose instead and live in bitterness for the rest of her life. But she took it to an extreme, okay? She lived in her wedding dress every day. She became a hermit and refused to leave her house. She left everything in the home exactly the way it was supposed to be. The cake on the table, everything in place, even down to setting the clocks in the house to the exact time that she was broken up with. Because for Miss Havisham, that was it. The world would go on, and she was forever frozen in time. Out of her bitterness, Miss Havisham adopted a daughter. Her name was Estella, and she was the most beautiful thing you'd ever seen. But oh, Miss Havisham did not adopt Estella for a loving mother-daughter companionship relationship. Nope. She adopted her to be a weapon of vengeance against men. She trained Estella to use that beauty, her wit, her charm, and her brilliance to make men fall desperately in love with her, so that at the right moment she could break their hearts and inflict on them the same pain that Miss Havisham had experienced. See, but in doing so, what Miss Havisham didn't realize is she was shutting Estella off to the world. She was robbing her of her own heart, rendering her incapable of loving when the moment truly came for her. So here we have the picture of two brides, the one who let the world pass her by and the one who refused to ever experience disappointment in the first place. You know, my lead pastor always says that disappointment is the gap between your expectation and your experience. I believe that's true. So I would take it a step further, and I would say your response to disappointment determines your direction. So as I have been thinking about this and the response that you can have to disappointment, I have prayed to God for us to have freedom like we've truly discussed earlier. We need freedom from the weight of our expectations, because I'll give you a newsflash, God did not call us to the life of bitterness that Miss Havisham chose for herself. He did not call us to a life of disappointment or lack of disappointment and fear that Estella had. Instead, He calls us to life to the fullest. He calls us to freedom. And so I prayed. I said, God, where are the areas that these women need freedom? What are the things robbing them of joy in their life? And He took me to 3 main points I want to cover. The first is we need freedom from the expectations of others. Have you ever looked around in your life and started to feel like you're so behind? Are you looking at the people around you that are getting married and having kids and buying the house and getting the promotion at work while you're sitting on the couch watching Grey's Anatomy and applying for the next position? Listen, I need you to say something with me. I will give you the beginning of the phrase and I want you to repeat after me. Not because I need to hear it, not for my validation, but because you need to hear yourself say these words and declare them over your life. Are you ready? Say, I am where I am for a purpose. See, God has you exactly where He needs you to be right now. Little do you know, He might be preparing you for the thing that you so desire. He might be waiting for you to grow and mature before you can even manage the thing that you want. Or He could be altogether protecting you from the thing that you think you want. You know, sometimes I think if we knew the things about the things we want that God knows, we wouldn't want it at all. So trust me when I tell you, no matter where you are, God has you there for a purpose and a reason. But the world would not have you believe that, right? Because the world preaches a winner's mentality. It says, if you're not first, you're last. Take care of number one. And that is a lie of the enemy. But you know what? Paul speaks to this in 1 Corinthians when he says, do you not know that in a race, all the runners run, but only one wins the prize? So run that you may obtain it. I know that sounds like Paul's agreeing with the world. Compete, right? Win the race, right? But I'll tell you what he's not saying. Paul is not saying there's only one right way to live. Only one of you gets the prize of Jesus in the end. No, Paul knows his audience. He's speaking to the people of Corinth, and there is one thing that Corinth is well known for throughout the world, and that is sports. They take those games so seriously. Actually, Corinth hosted the largest sporting event in the world, second only to the Olympics. So what Paul is saying to the people here is, oh my gosh, would you give the same care and passion to your relationship with your loving Father that you give these ridiculous games? Would you focus instead of the distractions and the things around you instead to the source that satisfies and supplies all your needs? That's what Paul is saying. But you know what else he says? To win the race, we have to train like athletes. Athletes have to reject certain things that hold them back, and they have to fuel themselves with things that advance them. So like athletes have to put down the donut and pick up the dumbbell, so we have to put down the opinions of others and pick up the word of truth. Do you know what the word of truth says about you? It says that you are more precious than rubies, that God is working together all things for the good of those who love Him. You are where you are for a reason. The second thing I want to talk to you about, we need to free ourselves from the expectation of perfection. So they say that there are 3 kinds of people, and I want you to listen and see if you can get an idea for which one you are, okay? There are the rule breakers, the rule makers, and the rule followers. So now I'm going to ask you to raise your hand and tell me which one you are, because we're going to have some fun. I know I can't be with you, and I know I can't see who raises your hands, but I promise if you'll play along with me and you'll raise your hands in that room right now, you guys are going to have some fun together laughing at each other. So first, raise your hand if you are one of my rule breakers. You are the rebel. And it's not necessarily that the rules aren't for a reason. You believe that. You just believe your way is better. So you got an even better rule, and that's the one you're going to follow. All right, and wave at me if you are a rule maker. You are the person going behind these guys and cleaning up their mess, because rules are made for a reason, and those ladies are it, right? And then finally, where are my people? Raise your hand if you are a rule follower. I am a rule follower to a fault. It has followed me all the days of my life, and it has created trouble for me, believe it or not. Rule following has created trouble for me. I lived in Mexico for a year when I was a kid, and I very vividly remember this one time that I was coloring a sheet of farm animals, and my teacher told us not to leave any white on the page. I turned it in, and it got rejected, and I turned it in again, and she said, "What do you not understand about not leaving white on the page?" And I said, well, there's a sheep on there, and sheep are white, and I can't in good conscience color that sheep anything other than white. So again, I got in even more trouble for that, because where's my creativity? But rule following very quickly turned into perfectionism for me. Perfectionism is what brought me testing anxiety when I was in college. There was a time that I studied for an exam so hard, and all my friends around me said, "Kate, why do you even care what your grade is? All you have to do is get a C on the test to make an A in the class. So we're just trying to pass. What's your problem?" And I said, "Well, yeah, but studying for a C is studying for 70% retention of the information, right? So that's 30% being ignored. And what if that 30% is 100% of the test, which leaves Kate with 0%, and who knows what that does to my grade?" You can laugh, you can call me crazy, you can still be trying to work out the math in your head. That is perfectly fine. But at the end of the day, we are all carrying some weight of perfection. I'm just here to tell you today, there are so many people in this room that are walking around thinking you have to be the wife whose house is perfectly together. You have to be the mom whose kids wouldn't dare misbehave in public. You have to be the friend who remembers birthdays and takes people out to coffee regularly. And at the same time, the boss babe who's crushing it at work. Listen, you cannot be all things to all people at all times. That's why Scripture tells us that we are parts of a body that is perfect when it's put together. Some of you are an arm, and some of you are a leg. Some are eyes, and some are ears. It's when we work together that we have perfect union as the body of Christ. And Jesus reminds us of this so many times, but I think the most so is by giving his life for us. See, there's only one person to ever walk the earth that was and will be perfect, and that is Jesus, the Son of our Father. Our Father loved us, his broken creation, so much that he sent his only Son to come wear the same flesh, to walk around in the shoes you and I walk in, to bear our sin and our shame and our brokenness and nail it to a cross that we would never have to ask, "Am I enough?" again. And don't we waste that perfect sacrifice when we worry. Jesus speaks to worry in John 4 when he says, "The day is coming that you will worship in spirit and in truth." Let me tell you what that means. To worship in spirit means take your rituals, take your standards, take your laws, and throw them out the window. Not because they're not important. They are. But because on their own, you can't achieve them on your own. There is a source that satisfies and supplies those things. But also keep in mind, the day is coming when we will worship in truth, which means, yeah, you want to worship in the counsel of God's law. You want to know his word and where it's taking you, knowing that you will never be perfect, but understanding you don't have to be. There's power in that. And finally, what I think is maybe the most challenging of all. We need freedom from our expectations. So I ask you, what's the thing that didn't work out for you? Are you looking around at everybody around you and saying, well, nobody would marry me now. I'm too old, or in this stage of life, I am not a suitable mate. Why would anybody want me? Are you looking around at the people with the babies and the children that you so wish would just come and complete your family? And God just hasn't given you that gift yet. Here's a hard one. When you look in the mirror, do you see those things as your personal failure? Or do you see the God who stands behind and goes before you in the fight? Because I assure you from personal experience, if that's not the image you see, you won't make it. Last year, I trained for what's called a Spartan race. If you've never heard of it, it's scary. A Spartan race is where you run a little bit and then you climb something really tall, and then you run a little bit and then you lift something really heavy, and then you run a little bit and you die a little more each time. For some people, it's just their personal hell, but for me, it was my Mount Olympus. It was the ultimate achievement that I could have for my physical strength. And so I put down the ice cream and the wedding cake and the donut, and instead I started training. I picked up the dumbbells. And you know what? I climbed a rope for the first time in my life. I learned how to lift heavier weight than I ever had before, and I achieved so many things that I never thought I could. I was truly the strongest and healthiest I had ever been in my life, at least physically. But then, as months approached and the race came, I began to experience serious illness that would rob me of that race. See, while my family got to run and earn the medal that I had worked so hard for, I sat on the sidelines. In 2 months, I had lost 20 pounds and almost all of my muscle mass, no climbing anything without that. And then 4 months in, I was officially diagnosed with Crohn's disease. If you don't know what Crohn's disease is, it's basically an inflammatory autoimmune disease that can affect you from head to toe in very different ways. And that's what it did to me. It sidelined me and it took my strength. And so I had felt devastated. Knowing what you know about me now, I'm competitive, I'm a perfectionist, I never stop moving. You can understand why my diagnosis was a death blow. Here I had spent my whole life doing everything right. I had eaten a healthy diet. Salads were my other favorite food to all that sugar that I mentioned earlier. And I exercised and I maintained a healthy way of living. I had my health in total control. And here one day I woke up to a disease that would attempt to take that from me every day for the rest of my life. It was devastating. And I sat in my grief and I sat in my bitterness until I started to feel myself become Miss Havisham. This is what I looked like in disappointment. But you know, there was one day that all of that turned around, because I decided one day, I don't want cobwebs in my life. I don't want my cake to rot. And it was like God woke me up one morning and said, enough of that. We are moving on now. We are moving forward. It's a new day. And I discovered so much purpose in that. See, I have had time to accept my diagnosis and even embrace it, because I have learned that when our expectations are violated, that's the perfect time for God to come in and give us new desires and a new purpose. See, I had been in the best shape of my life and I was race ready, but what I didn't know is that my fitness journey had become an idol to me. It robbed me of precious time with my husband building our relationship. It robbed me of my contentment with my self-image. Every day I would sacrifice at no ends to have a better body, to look better and achieve the next thing. And you know what? When I had physical health too, it was a good thing, but when I lost physical health, I found spiritual strength that I had never known before. God has held me in such unique ways. I'm convinced between my marriage dealing with this with my husband and the suffering that I have gone through in this journey with God, we have all three grown together in such a sweet way that only people who have endured hardship together can ever truly, really achieve. God has given me a purpose. And I don't know what it is. I still don't know why He gave me this diagnosis. I don't know why He has me on this path, but I can tell you that there is a purpose in it. I can tell you that He has also brought me to a place of better health. He's brought me to a place in therapy where I can achieve remission and I can move forward with my life instead of choosing to sit and hold my bitterness. And so, I've decided I can have my cake and eat it too. There's one more character that I haven't told you about, and his name is Pip. See, Pip is actually the main character of Great Expectations, and he is Miss Havisham's pawn and Estella's worst nightmare, because he begins to fall in love with Estella and see her walls come down for him, and falling hopelessly, desperately, beyond all reason, hope, and discouragement that could be, Pip falls for her and comes into a mysterious fortune, a large sum of money from a mysterious benefactor. Now, Pip believes that he's been given this so that it's from Miss Havisham, so that she's setting him up for a life with Estella and a future with Estella. But when Pip finds out that the fantasy he built for himself is not even near the reality, he goes into an identity crisis and spirals out of control. Spoiler alert, Pip loses every dime to his name, but he gets the girl and he wins a life well lived. There is a film adaptation that is one of my favorites of this book, and there's a quote that's always stuck with me. Here's a man that said, his name's Mr. Wemmick, and as Pip is departing and going to ride off into the sunset with Estella, Mr. Wemmick says, "I wish you good fortune, Mr. Pip." And Pip looks back at him, and you know what he says? "Anything but, Mr. Wemmick. Anything but." Sometimes our violated expectations are God's gift of permission to be who we truly are, freedom to be who we truly are. We are tragically flawed, wonderfully made, imperfect, beautiful humans. So I want to pray with you before we leave today, and just pray that God would put something on your heart that you can take away from this and move forward from. So if you'll bow your heads with me, we will pray. God, I thank you so much for bringing these women here today. I thank you for the power that you have placed in them. I ask that you would bring out new boldness that they've never felt and never known. God, that we can stop carrying the weight of our plans and our expectations on our shoulders. God, that we would entrust our plans to you, submit to you, that you can remove that weight and pressure and pain. And God, that you will come in and give us new desires and a new purpose that we can thrive. God, we trust that your plan is far better than our wildest imagination for ourselves. God, may we truly trust it, surrender it to you, and walk away from this place free. In your name we pray. Amen.